I always thought retirement would feel like freedom, like stepping off a moving train and realizing the world was finally quiet. No more deadlines, no more office politics, no more suits and meetings, just peace. And that's what they sell you anyway. The big dream. You've earned it, they say. Now you get to rest. So on my last day at the firm, they gave me a plaque, a damn plaque, 40 years of service to Raymond Ellis with gratitude and a slice of carrot cake. I hate carrot cake. People clapped, a few tears, a handshake from my replacement, a possessant, a kid who still said bro too often and called me Mr. E. Then I walked out of the building with a cardboard box and a weird smile on my face. It felt like the last day of school, only nobody was waiting to pick me up. No summer vacation on the other side, just my quiet apartment, just me. The first week was nice. I slept in, watched the sunrise from my little balcony. I made eggs, real eggs, not rushed, or microwaved, or wrapped in paper. I went for walks. I read. I reorganized the bookshelf twice. I sat in the park and smiled at dogs. But by the second week, I started counting how many times the refrigerator motor kicked on. I noticed how loud the silence was. By the third week, I started dressing up just to go to the mailbox as if someone might see me and think I still mattered. I didn't hate retirement. I hated the stillness, the absence of motion, the way the world kept moving without asking if I was okay with being left behind. My kids had their lives, grown, busy, far away. We texted occasionally. I didn't want to be the needy dad, so I wasn't. And my wife, Maggie, well, she'd passed 3 years earlier. Cancer, quick, unfair. She always said, when you retire, we'll travel, we'll finally live. She never got the chance. And now I was here, on the edge of this big life that suddenly felt very small. One rainy afternoon, I found myself going through old boxes in the hallway closet, stuff Maggie never let me throw out. Photo albums, high school yearbooks, a dusty box labeled Ray's Crap Do Not Touch. Inside was an old Minolta film camera, heavy, worn, beautiful. I hadn't touched it in decades. Back when Maggie and I would spend Sundays at the lake, her reading on a blanket, me taking blurry pictures of ducks and light hitting water. I turned the lens, it still clicked. Something about that sound made my chest tighten. It felt like memory and possibility mixed into one mechanical whisper. The next morning, I walked to the park with that camera slung around my neck. No plan, no expectations, just movement. I photographed a bench, wet with rain, the shape of a tree against gray sky, a kid chasing pigeons. Then I saw them, an elderly couple sitting under a shared umbrella. They weren't talking, just being together. The way their hands rested next to each other spoke volumes. I took the picture without thinking. Click. The woman looked up. She smiled. I nodded, embarrassed. Later, at home, I stared at that image on my tiny laptop screen. Something about it felt alive, more alive than I'd felt in weeks. That night, I opened an old Flickr account, posted the image, no caption, no tags. By morning, it had dozens of likes. A woman named JS commented, "This made me cry. I lost my husband last fall. Thank you." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Someone, somewhere, felt something because of something I did. It was the first time in years I felt useful. So I kept going day after day. I wandered, camera in hand, heart slightly more open. I started to see things I never noticed before. The way puddles reflected red traffic lights, the way old men fed birds while telling them secrets. I didn't even realize I was healing. I just knew I was moving again, breathing again, looking outward instead of downward. Then one day, a comment appeared under one of my photos. "You should join our Sunday group walk. We're all retired and weird." Attached was a link, a local photography group, Shuttered Souls. Their profile picture was a duck with sunglasses. I clicked join. The first group walk felt like a blind date with a dozen strangers, mostly folks over 50, some in their 70s, a few younger souls with gray in their hearts. They met at a little cafe downtown, I recognized no one, but a woman in a purple raincoat waved me over. "You must be Ray. I'm Nora. You posted that umbrella shot, right?" I nodded, startled. She beamed. I showed it to my sister. She cried. "You got the eye, man." The others introduced themselves. There was Phil, retired electrician, now obsessed with birds. Lydia, widow, 2 cameras always hanging from her neck. And a quiet guy named Dennis, who only spoke in quotes from old movies. We walked, we clicked, we told stories, and we weren't alone anymore. It was strange at how fast we bonded. Not over trauma, not over grief, but over seeing. We weren't trying to be professionals, we were just awake again. Nora and I started chatting more. She was 62, former librarian. Her laugh came from her belly, loud and unashamed. She wore mismatched earrings and always carried mints. One afternoon, she asked, "Did you always love photography?" I paused. "I did, then I forgot." She nodded. "Isn't it funny how we lose pieces of ourselves, then wake up one day and find them in a dusty box?" By month 3, I wasn't counting fridge hums anymore. I was editing photos, planning shoots, writing captions that actually meant something. My little Flickr had grown to nearly 2,000 followers. People commented regularly. One woman messaged, "I look forward to your work every morning with my tea." I wasn't just filling time, I was filling lives, including my own. Then Nora sent me a message, just a link, no explanation. I clicked. It was an ad for a photography retreat in Oregon, mountains, fog, group workshops, a week in nature. I stared at it for a while, then typed back, "Looks incredible." She replied, "I'm going. Come with me. Let's make your retirement less boring." I laughed out loud. And then, without overthinking, I booked the ticket. The flight to Oregon was the first time I'd been on a plane in years. I forgot how small the seats were, how dry the peanuts were, how amazing it felt to look out the window and see clouds from the top. Nora sat next to me, talking the entire way about books, about trees, about how airports smell like coffee and nerves. She made me laugh. I hadn't laughed that freely in a long time. The retreat was held in a lodge surrounded by pine trees and fog. There were about 20 of us, all ages, all backgrounds. We hiked in the mornings, took photos all afternoon, gathered at night to share our shots and stories. One man, a Vietnam veteran, showed us a photo of a single dandelion growing through a cracked sidewalk. He said, "This little thing, that's what I felt like when I came home." I'll never forget that. One evening, after a sunset shoot, Nora and I stayed behind. She was quiet, looking out over a ridge. "Ray," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever feel guilty for enjoying life again?" Her eyes were soft, but there was weight behind them. I knew that feeling. Maggie's memory sometimes came like a shadow, a gentle ghost reminding me I had once promised to grow old beside her. "I used to," I said, "but now I think she'd be glad I'm not rotting." Nora smiled through misty eyes. "Me too." The last night they held a showcase. Everyone picked one photo to display. I chose the couple under the umbrella, the first spark. It felt like honoring the moment I came back to life. When it went up, a young woman gasped, "That's yours? I saw that on Pinterest. It's been shared like everywhere." I blinked. The photo had found its own life, its own journey, just like me. On the flight home, Nora fell asleep on my shoulder. I didn't move. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. When we got back, everything felt bigger. The apartment wasn't as quiet. The streets looked richer. Even the old coffee shop I used to visit suddenly had charm. Or maybe it wasn't the world that changed. Maybe it was me. Nora and I kept seeing each other. Not romantically, at least not yet, but like 2 souls orbiting the same warmth. Sometimes close, sometimes with space, but never fully apart. We'd walk and shoot, talk about nothing and everything, and once a week we'd meet at the Sunday market for fresh apples and awful coffee. She told me about her late husband, Daniel, a math teacher with a stubborn streak and a love for jazz. "I still have his trumpet," she said once. "Can't play it, but I polish it every year. I told her about Maggie, how she'd dance while cooking, how she'd tuck her foot under my leg when we watched movies. Grief didn't divide us, it connected us, like two people who spoke the same quiet language. One evening, I was uploading new photos when I got a message from a man named Caleb. He said, "My dad just passed. I've been lost. I found your photos and somehow they help. They feel like breathing." He was 24, studying architecture, struggling with depression. We started talking. Every few days, he'd send a message. Not long, just enough. Went outside today, took a walk, sketched something, first time in months. Thank you. I'd never met him, but I felt responsible for him, like a tether stretched gently across time. That's when I had the idea, a blog, not just for photos, but for stories, for people like Caleb, like me, like Maggie, like Nora, people who felt stuck, who thought the story was over, but maybe it was just pausing before a new chapter. I called it New Old Men. Nora raised an eyebrow when I told her. Are women allowed? I grinned. New old souls, then? She approved. I posted weekly a photo, a story, sometimes a reflection, sometimes just a sentence, "You're not too late." And people came. Slowly, quietly, but they came. The blog grew faster than I expected. Emails started coming in daily. Some just said thank you. Others poured out years of silence in a few typed paragraphs. So one woman wrote, "My husband died 5 years ago. I haven't left the house since. Your post about the man feeding birds made me cry. I think I'll go to the park tomorrow." Another said, "I'm 72. I thought I was finished. Then I bought a camera. It was overwhelming at times, but also grounding. I wasn't fixing anyone, just sharing the small, quiet things that saved me. And in return, they reminded me why I was still here." One evening, Nora and I were sitting in my kitchen. She was drinking herbal tea. I was trying to cook something healthy, but mostly burning rice. She looked at me and said, "You know, Ray, you're kind of a lighthouse." I blinked. What? You don't run out and rescue people. You just stay in one place and shine, and people find their way by your light. I didn't know what to say, so I just handed her the unburned part of the rice. Sometime later, I got an email from a publishing house, small company, focus on memoir style storytelling. One of their editors followed my blog. "Have you ever thought about turning this into a book?" At first, I laughed. A book? Me? But the idea sat with me, like a leaf caught on my shoe and refusing to shake off. So I started organizing posts, filling in blanks, writing the parts I hadn't shared about Maggie, about the couch days, about Caleb. I called the manuscript The Second First Life. The publisher loved it. 6 months later, it was in print, a real book with my name on it, Raymond Ellis, author, me. The first copy arrived on a Tuesday. I didn't open it right away, just stared at the box. Like when I finally held it in my hands, I cried, not because I was proud, but because I finally felt seen. After the book came out, I started getting invitations, podcasts, local radio, then NP. They called it an unexpectedly tender look at aging, grief, and rediscovery. People I'd never met were quoting me online, lines I barely remembered writing. "You're not too late. The story isn't over just because the first part hurt. Don't let stillness convince you that you're done." It was surreal, but also peaceful. I didn't want fame, I wanted connection, and I was getting it in the purest way. One afternoon, I got a message from Caleb again. "I just got my first job. It's part-time, but I wanted you to know your photos kept me going. I'm framing the one of the dandelion." I didn't cry, but I did close my eyes and thank the sky. Nora and I went on more walks. Sometimes we held hands, sometimes not. She never pressured, never tried to name us. She just stayed. One cold Sunday, she asked if I wanted to visit her late husband's grave with her. I go every year. I usually talk to him, but this year, I don't think I want to go alone. I nodded, and we went. The cemetery was quiet, snow on the ground, wind in the trees. She brought a trumpet mute and laid it at the base of the stone. "Hi, Danny," she whispered, then paused. "This is Ray. He's not terrible." I smiled. Felt like a blessing. That night, we sat on her couch, wrapped in a shared blanket. She turned to me and asked, "Do you miss her still?" I didn't have to ask who. "Every day," I said. "But now it feels warm, like a memory I visit, not a wound I fall into." She nodded. "That's love." And maybe she was right. Maybe love doesn't die, it just changes shape. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it shows up again in someone else's laugh. I never imagined I'd be someone people looked up to. Most of my life, I played it safe, did my job, paid the bills, did what was expected. But the strange thing about growing older is that you finally realize no one ever really knew what they were doing. They were just pretending better than you were. And all that time I spent doubting myself, that was time I could have spent living. The blog turned into a small community. People started sending me their own photos, old men with new cameras, widows painting for the first time, retired teachers starting podcasts. One woman from Scotland sent me a drawing she made based on one of my captions. "Sometimes the second life is the real one." She turned it into a tattoo, a real one, on her forearm. I was stunned, but deeply touched. Somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling like I was retired. I just felt alive, unemployed, maybe, but joyfully so. I started hosting small local gatherings, photo walks, story circles. We'd meet at a park or library, sit in a circle. Everyone would bring one image and one truth. And for 2 hours, we'd just be real. No filters, no pretending we were young, no pretending we were done. One day, a man in his 80s, Earl, brought a photo of an empty recliner. He said, "That's where my wife sat. It's been empty 2 years. I used to hate looking at it. Now I talk to it every morning. Keeps me from forgetting her voice." The group was silent. Then someone else said, "That's the most beautiful thing I've heard all year." We cried a little, then we laughed, then we had cookies. Nora came to most of the events. Sometimes she'd just listen, sometimes she'd read a poem. Once she brought a printout of a message someone left on the blog. "This community saved my life. I was ready to leave the world." Then I read Ray's story. I'm still here. We sat in that moment, held it, let it breathe. There were no plaques for this part of life, no awards, no promotions, but I'd never felt more valuable. It had been nearly 2 years since I retired when I got an unexpected call from my old company. "Ray," said the voice on the other end, "we're putting together a mentorship program for younger staff. We'd like you to come in, talk to them, tell your story." I laughed. I'm not exactly a role model, but they insisted, said I had something they couldn't teach in a training module. So I went, stood in front of 15, 20 somethings in a glass conference room that used to intimidate me. They stared at me like I was a relic. I told them everything about the plaque, about the couch, about the camera and the umbrella, about Nora and the blog and the old man and the empty chair. When I finished, one kid raised his hand and said, "So, what's the secret?" I smiled. "There is none. But if I had to offer something, it'd be this: stop thinking your job is your life. Start listening to the quiet. And when something tugs at you from inside, follow it." I left the building lighter, not nostalgic, not bitter, just proud, not of what I'd done, but of who I'd become after I thought everything was over. That night, Nora came over with a pizza and a bottle of wine. We sat on the floor laughing like college kids. At one point, I looked at her and said, "I think I'm in love with you." She didn't blink, just took another bite of pizza and said, "I took you long enough." We didn't rush anything, didn't move in together, didn't plan a wedding. We just kept walking together. She still wore her mismatched earrings, still carried mints, still made me feel seen, even when I wasn't trying to be. And I started smiling in my sleep again. I wasn't trying to replace Maggie. You can't replace the people who made you who you are, but you can honor them by not dying while still breathing. One morning I woke up before sunrise. The apartment was quiet. Nora was still asleep, curled toward my side of the bed. I made coffee, sat by the window, and just watched the light change. It hit me then that I hadn't felt lonely in a long time, not because someone was there, but because I was there, present, awake, alive. I picked up my camera and took a photo of the empty kitchen table. Nothing dramatic, just morning light on old wood, steam rising from a chipped mug. I posted it with the caption, "Peace isn't loud, it's quiet and kind." That post went viral and thousands of comments, people writing things like, "This feels like home. This saved me today. Thank you for reminding me to breathe." A journalist reached out, said she was doing a piece on late life creators, wanted to interview me. She came by with a notepad and a soft voice, asked questions, took photos. Before she left, she said, "You know, most people your age are shrinking. You seem to be expanding." I laughed. "Maybe I was just frozen for a long time." She smiled. "That's going in the article." The piece came out a month later. Title, Raymond Ellis, the man who started over at 65. They ran the umbrella photo next to a picture of me holding the book. Emails exploded. Publishers called. TV people too. I said no to most of it. Fame wasn't the goal. Connection was. Still, it felt good to be wanted. Not for what I used to be, but for who I'd become. Nora read the article 3 times, kept the print copy in a sleeve. "You know," she said, "if you get any more popular, I might have to start charging for photos with you." I grinned. "You already charge?" "In mints." That night, I wrote in my journal, I thought retirement was the end, but maybe it was just the first time I was truly free. Spring came, and with it, an idea I couldn't shake. I wanted to do a show, a gallery exhibition, not for money, not for ego, but because I wanted to gather all those quiet moments, the ones that saved me, and give them a wall to live on. I rented a small space in the old arts district, polished the floor, painted the walls, hung the photos myself. I called it "I'm Still Here." Each photo had a short caption, just a few words, not explanations, reflections. She sat with me when I had nothing to say. This bench knows my secrets. Sunlight doesn't ask questions. Opening night, I expected maybe 20 people. 70 showed up, then 100. Some I knew, some were strangers, some had flown from out of state. They didn't come for me, they came for the feeling, the quiet courage, the reminders. I stood in the back and watched an older man cry in front of the umbrella photo, watched a young couple hold hands in front of the empty chair, watched Nora slip a mint into a child's hand. A woman approached me near the end of the night, gray sweater, sharp eyes. "Raymond Ellis?" I nodded. She handed me a small envelope. "I don't know if you remember me, but I worked at the front desk in your office. You were always kind." Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper and a photo. The photo was of me 30 years ago, laughing in the break room. I had no idea it existed. The note said, "You always saw people. I'm glad they're finally seeing you." I held that photo for a long time that night, not out of nostalgia, but gratitude for the man I was, for the man I became, for the man I was still becoming. Summer melted into fall. Leaves turned gold. Nora started wearing her ridiculous knit hats again. I teased her. She pretended to be offended. We were happy, not the kind of happy they show in movies, not the fireworks or violins, just quiet mornings, shared silence, a hand finding yours without needing to be asked. I got an email from Caleb. He'd been accepted into grad school, architecture. He wrote, "I finally believe I'm allowed to build things, not just buildings, but a life." At the bottom, he added, "P.S. Still breathing, still grateful." I printed the message and pinned it above my desk. One rainy afternoon, Nora and I sat watching the storm. She turned to me and said, "Do you think it's possible to fall in love twice?" I thought about it, then replied, "Only if you let yourself believe the second time is still real." She didn't answer, just leaned her head on my shoulder. That week, I got invited to speak at a retirement conference. I almost said no. Then I remembered what it felt like, sitting in that chair with a plaque in my lap, believing my best years were behind me. So I said yes. I stood on a stage in front of 300 people, all gray hair and good intentions. And I told them retirement isn't the end, it's the first honest pause most of us ever get. And in that stillness, you can either fall asleep or wake up. I showed them photos, told them about Caleb, about Nora, about Maggie's foot tucked under my leg. And at the end, someone asked, "What's the most important thing you've learned?" I smiled, that it's never too late to be deeply alive. The room clapped, not wildly, not like a show, but like a thank you, a quiet yes. A few weeks later, I turned 68. Nora baked a cake, lopsided, too much frosting, perfect. We didn't throw a party, just the two of us, 2 cups of tea, and a playlist of Maggie's favorite jazz records. We danced in the living room, slow, offbeat, smiling the whole time. When the music stopped, I looked at her and said, "Thank you for finding me." She replied, "You weren't lost, just buried." That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new journal. First page, fresh start, I wrote, "This year I will choose softness over silence, presence over perfection, life again and again." And I meant it. The blog kept growing. More voices, more stories, more lives unfolding in parallel. One woman from New Zealand wrote, "I read your post every Sunday while watering my garden. My husband says it's the only time I smile without him cracking a joke." People sent photos of their own chairs, benches, sunlight on floors. Each image carried a piece of them, and somehow a piece of me too. One day, Nora handed me a small wrapped box. "Well, what's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a notebook, leather bound, on the cover, "Third Life Notes." I raised an eyebrow. She said, "You had your first life, then your second after retirement. This is the one where you choose exactly who you want to be." That night, I wrote on the first page, "I want to be kind, I want to be useful, I want to be someone who listens." I didn't know where it would go. Didn't have a grand plan, but I knew this. For the first time in decades, I wasn't drifting. I was directed. And it wasn't about legacy, it was about now. A local high school invited me to speak. Their media class had been following my blog as part of a modern storytelling unit. I almost said no. Teenagers terrified me more than boardrooms ever did. But Nora said, "They don't need a speaker, they need a human." So I said yes. I walked into a room full of sideways glances and quiet chewing. The teacher introduced me, then sat down in the back. I cleared my throat, held up a photo, the umbrella shot. This was taken on a day I wasn't sure life had anything left for me. Silence. Then I told them the rest, not all the poetic bits. The real parts, feeling useless, the weight of grief, how taking a single picture saved me from disappearing. I showed them more photos, talked about light, about how photography isn't about the camera, it's about noticing. Afterward, a girl came up, maybe 17, hoodie pulled tight. She said, "My dad died last year. I haven't told anyone, but your picture, it felt like him. Thank you." I didn't have words, just handed her a small print of the umbrella couple, told her to keep it. She nodded and walked out. I sat in my car and cried for 10 minutes. Later that night, I told Nora. She didn't say anything, just placed her hand on mine and squeezed. And I thought, maybe this is what purpose feels like. Not loud, not grand, just true. I got an email the next day from the teacher. "They've never been that still. Something in your story cracked the walls they carry. Thank you for being real. We keep thinking we have to change the whole world, but sometimes it's enough to change one moment for one person." That girl in the hoodie, she'll never know how much she gave me. Winter came back around, the kind that quiets everything, where snow absorbs even sound. Nora and I took to long walks, scarves up to our noses. She called them frosted adventures. I called them freezing nonsense, but I never missed a single one. One morning I woke to find her already awake, sitting in the window chair, looking out at nothing in particular. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, then said, "I think I'm ready to live with you." I blinked. We'd been together nearly 2 years, but always with that gentle space between us, respectful, soft, unspoken lines. I smiled. "Yeah, me too." She laughed. About time, Ellis. Moving her in was easy. She brought 3 boxes, 2 plants, and 47 books. She claimed only 6 were essential. I knew better. We rearranged the apartment, made space for her tea collection, hung some of her photos. One of them, a blurry shot of me laughing in the rain, became our fridge photo. We didn't call it starting over, just continuing. Life didn't get perfect. My knees still hurt. I still miss Maggie sometimes, but there was light, always light. Then one evening, as we sat watching old black and white films, Nora leaned her head against mine and whispered, "Do you ever feel like maybe we got a second chance?" I turned to her. "No," I said, "I think we got our first real one." She smiled, didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. I used to think retirement meant stopping, ending, disappearing. But now I know it can mean beginning, choosing, becoming. 1 year later, I stood in the middle of a bookstore, small crowd in front of me, a stack of books beside me. The second one, Third Life Notes. It had taken me longer to write, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to say it right. I read aloud a page from the middle. We don't stop growing just because the world says we're old. If anything, we're finally wise enough to grow into ourselves. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Hmm." I smiled, closed the book, looked up. They weren't just readers, they were reflections. People who had lost, who had restarted, who had almost given up, but didn't. Afterward, people came up. Hugs, stories. A man showed me a photo of his wife, lost to cancer, said my first book helped him out of bed again. A woman in her 70s handed me a photo of her dog and said, "He died last year. You made me remember how it felt to love him." I kept every one of those stories in a notebook labeled "Proof I Was Here." Nora met me at the cafe across the street. She slid a slice of lemon pie toward me. "Well," she asked. I exhaled. I think I think we did something." She raised a brow. "We?" I grinned. "You're in every chapter, you know." She kissed my cheek. Later that night, we walked home, snow falling gently, sidewalks quiet. She slipped her hand into mine and said, "What would you have done if you hadn't found that old camera?" I stopped walking, thought about it. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe just survived." She nodded slowly. "But now?" I looked up at the stars. "Now I live." 5 years later, I'm 73 now. The beard came in grayer, the knees stiffer, but the heart surprisingly soft. Nora and I still walk every morning. Not as fast, sometimes not as far, but always together. She says my snoring has gotten worse. I say her tea collection has become a fire hazard. We laugh about both a lot. The blog is still up, still gets comments every day. People from Chile, Japan, Ukraine, Oklahoma. Some share their grief, some share their gardens. Some just say, "Thank you for making me feel less invisible." That's all I ever wanted, to remind someone you are not alone, even if it feels like you are. I teach now, not officially, but at the library I run a weekly circle. We sit, we talk, we write, we share. No one gets graded. But every word feels like it matters. Some of them are in their 30s, some in their 80s, but when they read, all I hear is truth. Caleb wrote me last spring. He graduated with honors, opened his own design studio. He sent me a card with a photo of his first building, clean lines, warm light. He named it the second first. Inside the card, he wrote, "For the man who taught me how to rebuild from ruins. Thank you, Ray. I'm still breathing." I keep that card on my desk, right next to Maggie's photo, and the trumpet mute. Nora started painting again. She says she's not very good. I say her skies look like feelings. She rolls her eyes, but she never stops painting. One of her pieces now hangs in our hallway. It's called "Still Becoming." Every time I pass it, I whisper, "Same." Some days are harder now. The body slows, the nights get colder, but the soul moves like a flame, quiet, steady, and completely unashamed. Last week, I found the original umbrella photo in an old backup drive. Still intact, still perfect. I printed it again, larger this time, framed it, and on the back I wrote, "This is where it began, where I remembered I still existed." I mailed it to the Photography Retreat Center in Oregon. No note, just that sentence on the back. They replied days later, "We're hanging it in the entrance so that everyone remembers it's never too late to start seeing again." Sometimes I walk through our apartment at night, look at the photos on the walls, the books, the chairs that are no longer empty. I think of the man I was on the day of his retirement, sitting on the couch, afraid of stillness. If I could talk to him now, I'd say, "Get up, Ray, you're not done. You haven't even started yet." I don't know how much time I have left. None of us do. But I know this: I will use every day like a brushstroke, messy, colorful, true. And when the final page comes, I hope someone finds my work on a shelf in a folder online and whispers, "He lived with both feet in the present." That will be enough. That will be everything.